Welcome back. Now, the Karnataka government has issued an order suspending all transactions with the State Bank of India and the Punjab National Bank. The order, approved by the Chief Minister Siddaramaiah and issued by the Finance Secretary, directed all state departments to close their accounts with these banks and immediately recover their deposits. To tell us more on what's happened, we're now joined by Vishwanath. Vishy, this seems like a very significant and rather drastic move.
That's right, Nupur. So essentially what had happened is two state departments of Karnataka government, the Industrial Area Development Board and the Pollution Control Board, both had invested money, deposited money with State Bank of India as well as Punjab National Bank for different periods of time in 2011 and 2013. In both those cases, essentially money was moved out of the account owing to some kind of fraud that happened. And despite the state government's intervention and repeated meetings with bank officials, nothing seems to have come out. And both the banks continue to hold back paying those deposits to the state government. So essentially, now the state government has issued an order saying that all state departments, universities sponsored by the state and any other organization linked to the state must immediately withdraw all deposits with these two banks, close their accounts, essentially make no further deposits to both these banks. So this is a significant move because remember that state governments are a large source of deposits for public sector banks. They place money with these banks and that's what shows up their deposit number. So if one state government is going to pull out that money, then that becomes very detrimental to public sector banks such as State Bank of India and Punjab National Bank. We're still trying to find out the exact impact on these two banks, how much money will actually flow out if this order continues to remain in effect. But as of now, the money is being ordered to be pulled out of the two banks.
Now, Vishy, you did mention that the state governments did go back to these banks asking for a reason for why things did not go in a particular manner. Have these banks reacted yet? What are they saying and what essentially was the point of view that they were making?
Yeah, so the clarity, there is no such clarity given in the state government statements at this point in time. All they said is that they've reached out to the banks and the banks had held multiple meetings, but no real solution to the problem. Remember that this is over 10 years old, this fraud case. And if in 10 years the banks have not really paid back that amount, then obviously that's a matter of concern. We're still trying to reach out to both the banks and try and get some kind of statement from them. But essentially right now, all we have is a state government notification asking all departments to pull the money out.
Right. Now, obviously questions, of course, Vishy, remain as to how this essentially will represent a significant shift in handling of the state's finances now.
Yeah, I mean, so if you were to look at how banks typically work with state governments, so there are specific designated accounts held by various departments, and if those monies are being pulled out, then no transactions happen through these two banks, and of course the deposits move out of the bank. So for the banks, this is a major issue, but for the state government itself, they can always move their money to another bank. That's not really that challenging for them. A few years ago, this happened when the Maharashtra state government had moved out money from Axis Bank, and this has happened in multiple other states. But typically, this is for a shorter period, that transition that happens, and then eventually state governments withdraw such restrictions and the money can go back to those banks. How long this will last is anybody's guess at this point in time.
Right, Vishy, do stay with us. We're also now joined by Mr. Ashwin Parekh, the Managing Partner of ATS Advisories. Mr. Parekh, good evening. Thank you for joining at such short notice. To begin with, this is a significant move that's coming in from the Karnataka state government. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, in both the cases, that is Punjab National Bank as well as in case of State Bank of India, the matters are sub judice. I mean, they are before the courts. So I suppose, the allegations of corruption and the allegation of transfer of state fund to a private company, in one case and in the other, in irregularities and other discrepancies observed. I mean, these are the matters that the court is certainly going to examine. I mean, the one quick observation I'll make is that both these banks have a huge reputation for having handled state government and central government funds, for decades now. I mean, not just years. And there have been, I suppose, very few instances. Now, of course, there is a lot more to what we can really see in these matters. Because there may be political vendetta, there may be political agenda, there may be other factors, several other factors that may be playing their part. But leaving all that aside, I suppose as far as these two matters are concerned, since the court is already sort of, examining the evidence on any irregularity, against the banks, and then, of course, the court will really decide. And what's really unfortunate, in both the cases is that the matters have been pending from 2011 in the courts and 2013 respectively. And it's been like so many years now, but the courts have not really completed their works. So, had, in fact, the hearing been completed, had the state government or those who have really put up the allegations, produced the necessary evidence before the courts, things could have been so different. But then, of course, putting a complete ban and withdrawing deposits, I thought, in the absence of any court order, in the absence of any court deciding on anything, also appears to me to be, I suppose, a little quick decision, a hastened one.
All right. So perhaps you think not much thought has gone into this. Thank you very much for the moment for joining us, Mr. Parekh. And let's, in fact, go across to Pratibha, who's the one who broke the story for us. Pratibha, tell us more in terms of the details of this order, and also what is the justification behind this?
Well, I will answer your second question first. In terms of the justification, yes, there have been two examples that have been provided by the Congress government here. One is the fact that there were several accounts held in different branches of the Punjab National Bank by Karnataka Industrial Area Development Board, the KIADB. And this happened in 2011, where several of these accounts where money was deposited, but due to alleged irregularities conducted by the bank officials, this money couldn't be refunded, and the matter has been lying in the court. The matter is sub judice, and they've been fighting this in the court for over 10 years now. And similarly, the Karnataka State Pollution Control Board as well had deposited around 10 crore rupees at the SBI Bank of Mysore, and which was allegedly adjusted along with a loan for a private company. And this was also done with forged documents in 2013. Considering these irregularities and the fact that this case has been pending at the court, audit verification process was also duly done by a committee, and this committee, looking into this, discussed this for several months together and several times as well, and arrived at this decision. Now, what is the decision? The fact that several of the government departments, public enterprises, corporations, local bodies, universities and other institutions will terminate the accounts that they hold in both the Punjab National Bank as well as the SBI forthwith. And additionally, no further deposits or investments can be made. And the deadline that has been given is September 20th. Now, this has definitely caused a lot of flutter in the financial circles, mainly because this could be a huge mess in terms of the protocol that needs to be followed. Where do you deposit all that money to, and which account do you transfer that to? These are some of the questions that are being raised, while the justification that has been provided and has been maintained by the Congress government here is the fact that this is to stop the misuse of alleged government funds.
Now, Pratibha, a lot of people will wonder why this sort of a knee-jerk reaction and why this really short span of time, because it's just about a month and over about 5 days more that's been given to stop these transactions or dealings that these banks have with the state government. Anything that you're hearing on that?
Well, in fact, the only thing that the government has maintained is the fact that the sooner the deadline is when there could be a lot of definitive action that can be taken in terms of stopping the misuse of funds. But in the financial circles, as well as talking to experts, most of them have suggested that this is definitely going to be a knee-jerk reaction of sorts. And they have said that there needs to be a lot of streamlining guidelines that needs to be provided in terms of where to go and how to go about this, with no specifications that have been given why such a drastic decision that has been taken. However, no answers as yet from the Karnataka government on that front.
Right, Pratibha, do stay with us. Let's go back to Mr. Parekh. Mr. Parekh, you were just hearing Pratibha. She was giving us the details. What has happened now? How do you see the impact on these two banks specifically? And as we were earlier speaking, it's been a long pending case. It would, appear to a lot of people that this is a bit of a knee-jerk sort of a reaction, and the deadline that's been given is also just about a month.
Sure. I mean, exactly. That's exactly my reaction as well. See, there are various facets to this, which need to be examined. I mean, and of course, the detail will be available with perhaps the courts, which is examining the evidence. But let us say let's say any institution, any state government sort of sponsored institution or central government institution, when they open an account with the bank, I mean, as a part of that, they normally submit the business of that organization, the ways in which, let's say, the funds will be deployed, and also they provide very clearly those who are authorized to operate the bank accounts. Now, as far as the bank is concerned, the bank, will look at the proprietary of the transaction. If the transaction is conducted by an authorized person or persons, in most of the cases there will be more than one signatory, sort of, who will normally be authorized to withdraw any funds or to utilize funds or to deposit them as well, for that matter. Now, in those cases, the bank, if it is expected, if there is any stretch of imagination to expect that the bank would get into the end use of that fund in terms of whether it was for, let's say, any corruption or any, let's say, wrong payment, or, to the extent that the bank can be held responsible is a matter of question to my mind, as far as the bank is concerned, based on all the documentation filed by the institution and the resolutions made by the board of these organizations, the resolutions very clearly spell out the purpose. The resolutions very clearly spell out the authorized persons who have the right to operate the bank account. So my, submission would be that as far as these two banks are concerned, if they produce the evidence suggesting that the transactions were conducted, with due evidence, with due documentation that was made available to the bank, and the bank has that on its records, then I suppose extending the argument that the bank should get into the proprietary of the transaction and the reason why the transaction is being conducted would, I thought, make it a little stretch a little further. However, of course, one must get into the detail of these. If these transactions were conducted, for instance, without proper authorization of these transactions, or then, of course, the state government has a reason, to really go and, the reaction, whether we call it knee-jerk or whether we call it some reaction, it has to have some basis, has to have some evidence. It just cannot, and particularly when the matter is sub judice, it cannot really within a short span just put an end to, the entire banking relationship with these two banks, And I still maintain that both these banks, over the decades, have really been a part of the economic development of the country. They've really worked very closely with all the state governments, central government, for several of those government organizations, infrastructure projects, so many other things. Including even the pension funds and including salary transfers and everything. So I suppose I would certainly agree that this is a knee-jerk reaction, basically.
Right, Mr. Parekh, finally, of course, how do you see the impact on the stocks of these? Obviously, these are the two PSUs, essentially, that, India puts its trust in.
Well, I suppose I mean, over a period of time, you'll realize that these kind of sort of, ripples keep on occurring. I mean, will they have sort of, any impact on either the stock price? Stock price is a little far-fetched situation. I mean, a day or two do not matter in case of, let's say, these institutions. Perhaps there may be some reaction for a day or two, and then once again it can go back to where it was. I suppose one has to wait for the court orders, really to really understand whether there is a larger term reputation risk, that these two banks will carry. The court order very clearly suggests that the bank did sort of in some form or the other participate in wrongdoing. But which is, of course, to my mind, a little bit of a stretch. I mean, banks do not normally get into sort of, these things. So as long as the bank, has examined that the authorized persons conducted the transaction, to expect the banks really to thereafter do anything more than that would, I thought, be a little bit of a stretch. But let it be. I mean, let's, I suppose, wait for the court orders also. As far as this order is concerned, because it's actually offered by the state government, and the secretary of the state government has really signed the document. I would assume that the institutions, the state government institutions, will have to really follow that, unless, of course, the government issues a fresh sort of clarification or an extension or whatever.
Right, and unless, of course, the state government does rethink this. Thank you very much, Mr. Parekh, for joining us on the broadcast. So that's all we have time for right now. The latest that we are covering, of course, is the Karnataka government has issued an order suspending all transactions with the State Bank of India and the Punjab National Bank. The order, approved by the Chief Minister, was issued by the Finance Secretary and directed all state departments to close their accounts with these banks immediately and recover their deposits. Thank you very much for watching.